assume that you have only 30 seconds.
Start with just the core.
Hi, welcome to the Middle Manager Mastery, the show that helps managers to move from execution to influence through stronger EQ, high productivity, and much bigger impact. I'm your host, Shruti Rustagi, and each week I sit down with senior corporate leaders, founders, and experts to unpack the tools that move you from being a manager to a leader. Real conversations, honest insights, no fluff. Welcome.
Hi, Anil. Glad to have you here on the podcast today. So, how about we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, Shruti. Good morning to you. It's great to be on your podcast. So, for my story is that I've had a standard sort of a background, right? I've studied for 25 years. So, I mean, like, first 25 years, I was like college, engineering, MBA, the typical Indian way. And then I joined the corporate career. So the next 25 years was all about corporate, building a family as well, parallelly, right? So growing promotion and growing in corporate, working with companies like Dell, Levi Strauss, L'Oreal, and both in India as well as in Singapore, looking at the regional markets, global roles, markets like China, Australia, Japan, etc. Very interesting. At a point in time, I covered almost 25 odd markets across Asia, traveled a lot, built e-commerce businesses from scratch in 10 markets. Yeah, so it's typical big teams and blah, 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 blah. So that was my next 25 years, right? But I've also been the last 15, 16 years, since 2009, I've been a student of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Purana, etc. So it's just, it was just listening for me, right? I was listening to discourses from a guru in Telugu, which is my mother tongue. And he speaks, he is amazingly good speaker. He speaks very eloquently, but the point, while he speaks from a perspective of bhakti, his point was really about how to convert all the wisdom that is there in this into practicality, bring it into our lives, really, right? So, how do we make the most of the opportunity that the creator, why we exist? And for that, these itihasas, Puranas serves as sort of great references, right? Or kind of guideposts, etc. But these two worlds were separate for all of
Yeah.
Indians. I mean, we have the Bhagwan wala world, and then we have the professional world. In the professional world, we remove our Bhagwan ka hat and sort of like, okay, I am now totally corporate. I'm going to behave like more American than Americans or more British than Britishers. Right? So that was the whole principle, right? But when we are at home or when we are in a temple, we are like, okay, nahin, or in a whichever is our religious place of worship. It's about really that devotion, spirituality, etc. So these two worlds don't meet really. Yeah. So we put on, we're kind of like bipolar in that sense, right? So, but for me, it was always like, okay, so I see some relevance, some resonance between these two worlds, right? So you have Ramayana, Mahabharata, you've got the corporate career, etc. Guruji was really about how to, and he speaks about using these itihasas to teach values to our youngsters, right? And I missed that. While growing up, I started listening to it at 39, right? So, and I've been listening to it 35, 36, last 15 odd years, right? I wish I had learned them much earlier. So for me, that became the point, right? Which was kind of a prickly problem that I wanted to solve. And over the last couple of years, for me, it was really about, okay, so what am I doing? I turned 50 just a couple of months back, right? So this year. So it was the time when I'm looking at, okay, so what is the purpose of my life? What am I doing? So it was then about really bringing these two worlds together, and which was my sort of pivot, right? Which is to sort of combine these two in the sense that there is a tremendous amount of wisdom which is there in Ramayana and Mahabharata, which of course we'll speak about. Most of the commentaries, most of what we hear today is primarily from a bhakti perspective, right? Devotion perspective. But But the wisdom that is there in this typically gets lost because we don't really go into the original text or the references, etc. But when you go in, you really see a gold mine, and there are like pearls literally lying to be discovered. But the challenge is you need to find the right and decode it and express it in the right language. So, which is what I've been doing, right? So, over the last 18 months, I've been, in this journey. So, the purpose really for me is to bring these two together, to use the ancient wisdom and that we have and decode it for modern life, really, right? Like modern business, modern leadership. And surprisingly, it's super relevant, super pertinent, super relevant, and as sharp as what an Amazon six-pager is.
Wonderful. Interesting that you connect it to the Amazon six-pager. You alluded to writing a book about Ramayana, about the leadership lessons from Ramayana. So, how about Anil, you talk to us a little bit more about that? So, tell us about the book and also share with us like some of the leadership lessons or the stories that you're quoting in it. It would be fantastic for us to hear that.
Sure. So yeah, so my book in a nutshell, think of it as Harvard Business Review or Harvard Case Methodology connecting with Ramayana, right? So that's the whole thing. So instead of a story, I've looked at, stories. Ramayana is full of stories, right? It's basically um, so I've looked at different situations. So looked at specific situations, the characters within that, what decisions are they making, what are they saying, and then use that in a typical case format, right? So situation analysis and takeaways in a sense, right? And of course, the context or the theory, etc., behind it, right? So, and all of these pertain to different skills from a leadership perspective. So, communication, coaching, building high performance teams, resilience, humility, the softer aspects of leadership, which are extremely important, awareness, strategic frameworks, which is quite interesting. I'm going to talk about one of them. More importantly, sort of having a North Star, higher North Star, right? For us, what really is leadership, right? And what is the definition of leadership from a Indian wisdom perspective, right? So all that from in a set of cases, right? So I've basically got about 45 case studies in the book covering about 7 8 different facets of aspects of leadership, right? Like what I mentioned. And the intention is that we, a bit like Maslow's hierarchy, you sort of move from the simple ones to the more complex, intermediate, and then the highest ones, right? So to give you an example, communication, coaching, etc., are the foundations of being a leader, right? First thing you need to do is communicate. You need to build a team. You need to coach people, right? So that's kind of like the foundation. Then the intermediate skills are really the softer aspects of leadership, right? How do you become emotionally resilient, mentally resilient? How do you sort of charge yourself back and sort of share? Because it's not just you alone, right? You're responsible for a team. So, how do we sort of take our team with us, right, in that journey? How do we become humble, right? Humility, not in terms of my team did it, but really mean it, really care for the team, right? Like, how do we become a servant leader? And empathy, compassion. It doesn't, if it's not from the heart and if it's not from the mind. So, there's a concept called manasa vacha karmana, right? So, manasa vacha karmana basically means mind, what I think, what I speak, and what I do. All these need to be in alignment. When they are not in alignment, when I'm thinking something else and doing something else, it's very visible. People can say, "Ye to fraud hai. This guy is a fraud," right? So, or this person's a fraud. It's very clear. So, how do we sort of really imbibe that and build that philosophies? So, frameworks like that. And then the last one is really about self awareness, situational awareness, and building a compass, an inner compass. I mean, in Indic tradition, we call it dharma, but the dharma can be of course, it's a very broad concept, but there is something called a leadership dharma or a raja dharma or a leader's dharma, which also a leader needs to practice. So it's in that order, right? So I'm trying to make a pyramid really. So that's really the substance of the book or the overview of the book. So a few cases that I've written about in my book, and I keep posting on LinkedIn as well about it. So there are three or four which are my favorite ones, right? So the first one is really about concise communication or communicating to the context, right? And the story or the context goes like this. So Hanuman and his team of the Vanaras have gone south, search for Sita. Hanuman goes to Lanka, finds Sita, has a very difficult search for her, but finds her, and then fights a battle, and then meets Ravan, and then comes back to report to Ram and Sugriv. How does he report? How does
That's
he
interesting.
actually?
I
Yeah.
didn't think about the how does he report it
How
all
does he
so
report?
far.
How does he report? And that is a critical question.
Mm-hmm.
He reports in three words.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So his report comes, he says, Namaskar to Ram and Sugriv, and he says, Akshatam Niyatam Devi. That's it. Zip. His entire journey summarized in three words. Now, think of a boardroom presentation. In a boardroom, when you're presenting, what do? Start with an elevator pitch, headline summary. Your headline covers everything. This is exactly that. Three words. Okay, let me tell you what they mean. Akshatam. Akshatam basically means safe. In,
Hmm.
okay. Niyatam. Niyatam is related to niyat, what we use in Hindi, right? So niyata means still devoted, loyal to you. Okay? And Devin, which is Sita. That's it. What was the mission? The mission was find Sita, check whether she's alive, and is she still loyal to me? He accomplishes this in three words. So he's got that essence of the mission and communicated it in three words to Ram and Sugriv. Now think of a management lesson. We've not learned this. And when I started reading, wow, it started blowing up my mind. Like, wow, this is exactly what I've been taught. I mean, not even in B school, huh? We don't learn this in B school. We learn,
No,
start making presentations in boardrooms. Like we're like, oh, we're senior managers or directors, and then we're being
Anil,
told
I wish we had this conversation day before. Yesterday, I was taking a training session into our workshop on executive communication. And this is exactly what I told them. The headline, you have to start with just the core, the why, the so what, the headline. Just that, address, answer first. And phenomenal. You just blew up my mind.
that's what he does. Amazing, right? So that's the first thing. But the interesting part really about this is that he repeats the story thrice. He says things thrice, right? So this is the first time, his first report. So zip, and so he's basically given the essence, the summary, the exact summary, the highest level, not even the exact summary. I'll just say the headline, 3 second sort of summary to Ram and Sugriv. Okay, so then suddenly the whole mood changes, right? So because everybody is eagerly waiting, suspense on the knife's edge, etc. So they hear, and then this obviously relief. So then the next level is Ram asks him, okay, how is Sita? What did she say to me? So then Hanuman gives an executive summary. So he basically makes about 15 sentences, and in bullet points, he sort of says the key messages that Sita has given to Ram, including, the coded references. There is a story of Kakasur. There is a story of Ram and Sita in the Aranya, in the forest together. and then the Chudamani, right? So all these three, so he summarizes the entire thing and gives an exec summary, sort of a little more detail, little more color to the Sita. And he basically says Sita's okay now, good in spirit, but we need to act. So he says also the so what of the entire thing. He says we have 1 month. Raman has given 2 months to Sita, but Sita Mata has given me only 1 month. And we need to go and recover her within 1 month because she said that she won't survive beyond 1 month. That's it. Again, stop. So zip. So again, so understanding of the context, and then he answers to the context, to the point. And then Ram asks him a whole lot of questions. Okay, what is the whole thing? Tell me more. I want to know more about Sita. So then he gives the whole project report, right? Which is like a big typical traditional style. So project, which is also interesting the way he presents it, but he gives a whole detailed report, right? Without talking about his heroism at all, humility, right? But that's a separate lesson, right? So if you see the communication style, right, and the takeaways from this, first, exact summary, answering to the mission, the essence of the mission, answering to the context, right? Depending on what the questions are. When you are in a presenting to leaders, assume that you have only 30 seconds. That's it. Start with that. And whether you have an hour's meeting or 30 seconds, it doesn't, 3 minutes, doesn't matter. You have to present to the 30 seconds because if you don't capture that first 30 seconds, 1 minute, you've lost it. So that's the lesson, right? So, and then of course, answering to the context, answering to the what, why, and the deep dives, etc. So, which is what my first, one of the
Very nice.
stories that I really like.
Very nice, Anil. Two things immediately strike me. If you've heard of Barbara Minto's pyramid, the typical pyramid principle of executive communication, it's one of the most standard frameworks being used. This is exactly how that goes, like your elevator pitch or the headline, and then you share the core details, the supporting arguments, as she calls it. And then the last level, if asked, you get into the detailed project report. So,
Okay,
like,
Bharat have
it's
surely learned from Rama.
taken a leaf out of Ramayana for sure, right? And then what you said, another thing, just reminded me of one of the discussions I had with one of the finance directors at Amazon. When you said that in this entire thing, Hanuman never talked about the hardships he went through or Hanuman went through. So I remember what she had said, Stephanie Washington. So she had said that whenever you're being asked a question, just answer the question in the context in which being asked. Don't use it as an opportunity to just share how much you know. That's so pertinent. So thank you for
Correct.
sharing that and waiting to hear more.
Thank you for tuning in. If something landed for you today, try it this week and tell me how it went. If this episode helped, share it with someone who you think needs it. Leave us a rating so that this show reaches everyone it's meant to reach and it's meant for. Till then, keep building the influence, keep driving the results, and keep having the impact. See you in the next episode.